On the surface, Born to Rise is about rethinking education by creating charter schools in underserved New York City districts, but at the book's core is the story of Deborah Kenney and her path to recognizing her calling. Her ability to challenge the status quo and create change while holding on to her values exemplifies the type of courage and resolve needed to make a difference in the lives of children. Kenny is the embodiment of a lifelong learner. As a teenager, she spent more time immersed in school and personal studies than at parties. She found belonging when, at summer camp, she met like-minded friends and counselors and her mentor, Mel Reisfeld, who pushed Kenny to think independently, challenge societal norms, and be of service to others. She would carry these ideas as values for the rest of her life. Kenny revered the writings and thoughts of people like Chaim Potok, Rainier Marie Rilke, Ram Dass, and T.S. Eliot. She loved exploring ideas of spirituality, religion, and philosophy, and sought answers to profound questions. What is the meaning of life? What was her ultimate purpose? In search of answers, she found herself in Israel, where she studied Kabbalah. Here she realized how small she was in the universe and found her life's purpose: to serve others. After undergraduate studies, Kenny went on to Teachers College, where she explored her own teaching philosophy, while at home she raised 3 children with her husband, Joel. Upon graduation, she set out for the corporate world. Kenny started at Parenting magazine, where she naively hoped to make a difference in the lives of readers, but became frustrated when she realized the magazine was focused on increasing profits. She then moved to lead the publishing division at Sesame Street, and after that, to work at the Edison Project, a for-profit company that managed schools. Through her experiences working at large companies like the Edison Project, Kenny watched the failure of trying to mass-produce an educational experience with a corporate, top-down structure. People, not product, became one of her founding ideologies. To be effective, Kenny felt she needed to embrace and empower teachers as individuals instead of taking them for granted.
You know, I think around the country talk a lot about evaluating teachers, but what we really have to focus on is supporting and developing teachers. It takes a lot of practice, and it takes a lot of time and mentoring and co-planning lessons, analyzing your lessons, deconstructing what happened, figuring out how to do it better next time. Teachers need a lot of support in order to really master the craft. And so I think that there's really a responsibility we have to take as school principals and as school leaders to create a school environment that gives a lot of time, a lot of support, and the colleagues collaborating together. And when teachers work in teams and are given that support, then they can truly become rock star teachers.
It is also important not to overlook Kenny's personal life, as it is an integral part of the story. As she stayed by her husband's side during his battle with leukemia, she also strove to make things feel normal for her 3 children. Eventually, Joel lost his fight with cancer, and readers thought Kenny might lose her will, but her personal struggle only brought her closer to realizing her greatest purpose. To quote her rabbi, "When you realize that you don't matter, all of a sudden there are all these other people who do matter. Life is about service to others. I mean, what else is there?" She realized her ultimate purpose in life was to provide underprivileged children with the education they deserved, and decided she would do so by opening schools in Harlem, the worst school district in the U.S., with her emergency savings. Kenny turned her home into her office and worked almost around the clock. She had to jump through hoops to get even the simplest of tasks ticked off her seemingly unending to-do list. There were very few charter schools in New York City at the time, and there was no roadmap on how to put one together. While her plans were in their infancy, and with so many details still to attend to, her passion remained unwavering, and her undeniable vision and fire drew others to her. Kenny had a knack for making connections with people who inspired her. She cold-called David Kearns, a CEO at Xerox and former U.S. Deputy Secretary of Education. From Kearns, she learned that approaching education like a product that could be replicated was not feasible. She shadowed Dan Shalvey, a charter school pioneer and head of Aspire Charter Schools in California, and drew inspiration from his and many others' radical approaches to education reform. One mentor, Cy Flegel, the author of a similar story, Miracle in East Harlem, taught her about how he used to finesse his way around the teachers' union by practicing what he called creative non-compliance. But what Kenny took away was the fact that she needed to start a charter school so she could be free of the union entirely. Kenny also applied her experience and connections in the corporate world. She took advice from Peter Drucker's management style, which placed a strong emphasis on knowledge worker productivity, where supervisors put faith in their employees by setting goals but giving them complete autonomy.
How is it fun to learn?
They just teach us in a fun way.
So you guys look forward to going to school in the morning?
Yes.
These kids attend one of those new charter schools, free public schools, but their charter lets the school escape the bureaucracy of regular schools, including teachers' union rules.
This philosophy aligned with her belief that teachers needed freedom to succeed. She also was inspired by GE CEO Jack Welch's approach to management. He emphasized the human aspects of business and utilized a technique called workout, where employees could openly discuss their work frustrations and collaborate to solve them. While she was still conceptualizing how to run her schools, Kenny was also facing looming deadlines, including a business plan to be evaluated personally by Bill Gates Sr. and a meeting with the SUNY trustees at the Charter School Institute to pitch her proposal for her 2 schools and her vision. There was so much red tape, and she hated bureaucracy, but she was motivated to provide good schools, so she played the game and put her nose to the grindstone. Her first application for funding was a no. Meanwhile, the Gates Foundation reached out with a message that her business plan had been approved, but funding might not be possible. The catch-22 is that without funding, her charter school application would be denied. Still, Kenny attended her meeting with the SUNY trustees and spoke candidly about her mission to change schools. At the moment when she was about to be declined due to lack of funding, the office received a fax from the Gates Foundation. Her funding had been approved, and her charter application had too. Deborah Kenny was ready to start a school. In a donated workspace, Kenny and her team began working on a monumental to-do list. They balanced all the imaginable tasks associated with starting a school, including looking for a building and visiting schools to find teachers. Kenny visited the schools herself and formed the opinion that there is only one common element of excellent schools, and that is talented people who are exceptionally motivated. As Dr. Kenny began to interview potential new hires, she learned which traits she was not seeking in a teacher. Arrogance was one. So was a lack of classroom control. While observing, she met a 5th grade English teacher she calls Rebecca. Rebecca had incredible classroom management skills. And then there was Nick, a math teacher who engaged his students through thoughtful discussion and critical thinking. These were the kind of teachers she wanted teaching at the Harlem Village Academies, and they both would end up doing just that. Now that Kenny had a school and teachers, she needed students, so she hit the pavement to get children signed up for the admission lottery. She met children and families disillusioned by their schools and desensitized by violence and poverty in their community, but she turned her sadness into the determination that each student would be treated as her own child. On April 1st, 2003, the Harlem Village Academies held their first lottery and accepted 74 students. On the first day of school, Kenny arrived at the building to see a line of students and teachers out front, locked out in the pouring rain. She had forgotten to have facilities unlock the building. Angry parents, no supplies, late lunch, disorganized hallways, behavior issues, and teachers yelling at students were all problems that Dr. Kenny encountered on the very first day of opening her school. One of Kenny's techniques to enforce discipline was to gain respect by treating students like her own children and getting to know them. She also observed Rebecca even more now that she worked at HVA. She ensured constant behavioral corrections and established behavior routines without making it the focus of class. Other teachers, like Nick, were not so good at classroom control. Dr. Kenny observed Nick and gave him pointers and feedback over the course of several weeks until he improved. For the opening of the school's second year, Kenny decided to hold a teacher conference in which staff were given the freedom to collaborate and develop 3-day behavioral plans for their students. Once they implemented their behavior plans, the same teachers then observed and evaluated each other with feedback. By the end of the project, there were no more bullies, and the children had begun to regain a sense of security they had lost. One parent praised the HVA, saying, "My child is a child again." Dr. Kenny was able to realize her passion for service through the creation of the HVA. She deeply cared about each student and honestly sought to change education as a whole. Kenny did an admirable job of making sure meeting children's needs was the fundamental priority of her school. The culture of her team of educators was children come first. We put children's needs before your own. The well-being and education of children is our highest priority, and all our decisions are based on what's best for them. But while Deborah Kenney was busy breaking the mold and rejecting the one-size-fits-all model of education, the rest of the nation was responding to the No Child Left Behind Act by placing an increased emphasis on standardized testing. In a 2015 survey from the National Center for Education Statistics, data showed a decline in teacher autonomy and decreased job satisfaction during the No Child Left Behind era. Analyzing this data for NEA Today, Tim Walker argued that, quote, in the United States, policymakers talk a lot about giving autonomy to schools that stops at the district or administrative level and often results in decision-making that ignores the voices of educators and the community. So, despite giving students back their innocence and providing a huge social service, Kenney's teachers still needed to undo the damage done by their former educators. Kenney came across students like Eugene, whose prior schools had failed to teach them how to pronounce the sounds of vowels and consonants. Wanting to fix the problem, Kenney did some research. She came to the conclusion that other schools that had higher reading test scores made their curriculum nothing more than test prep. Kenney planned to transform that strictly test prep curriculum into something more long-term, a passion for reading. Eventually, she began to see results. Her students were reading, some for the first time. The Harlem Village Academies were a groundbreaking success, with some classes showing 100% pass rates on standardized tests. President George W. Bush personally visited the HVA with a message of congratulations for their hard work and success. While she enjoyed the praise somewhat, Kenney still felt undeserving. The news even touted the HVA as a national model of excellence, but she wanted more. Kenney continued to improve herself, meeting and learning from major CEOs. At one meeting, something stuck with her that she couldn't shake. One CEO who goes unnamed discussed his company's values and culture statement. Quote, he took his corporate values personally and even used them to reflect on his own leadership weaknesses each year. Quote, Kenney realized that she had failed to encourage teacher collaboration and bonding. The culture of her school had been crafted from the top down. So, at the next faculty meeting, she focused strictly on giving teachers ownership of the school's culture and values. This conference changed everything. Teachers were bonding and helping each other grow, and the students began to reap the benefits. One day, at a local store, Kenney ran into a parent who proclaimed she was removing her student from HVA. This was a problem that had been growing. Students were dropping out, but rather than fix it herself, she left it to her teachers to address the issue. They developed ideas to improve everything from tutoring and behavioral systems to parent communication. I was beginning to feel a revolution starting, one led by the teachers themselves, she says. By the start of the next academic year, it was the teachers planning the bonding events and staff meetings, not her. Dr. Kenney had come to the realization that a positive culture can't solely come from a top-down approach. School frameworks created from the top are filled with education buzzwords like proven and research-based, and teachers are expected to follow a curriculum like they are reading from a script. Instead of treating teachers like cogs in the machine, Kenney wanted to create a platform that allowed educators to be creative, make decisions, and inspire children. For students to rise to their highest potential, it was essential for teachers to be allowed to rise with them, and she achieved just that.
This union boss doesn't want charters in what he calls his schools.
Over my dead body, they're going to come there. I'm going to be there and physically try and stop them. There's certain things that don't mix. Oil and water, you can't emulsify them.
There's no room? There aren't these half-empty schools?
There's not half-empty schools.
Bill Grasso says charters favor rich kids, but
Newark Public Schools spend almost $400,000 per classroom. The charters get less.
Not that much less.
But they get less. It's hardly the rich versus the poor.
I'm happy for them. We don't want
Then
them.
let them into your schools.
Don't want them in our schools. Why should they be?
You're not happy for them then.
Well, listen, does Fox and CNN, are they in the same building? I don't think so.
Toward the end of the book, we witness the first graduation of the Harlem Village Academies. Deborah Kenney could not have been more proud of her babies. Celebrity John Legend even made a personal appearance to perform his original song, Born to Rise, after which her book was titled. At the celebration dinner, her students praised her, and even Mel, Kenney's old professor and her biggest inspiration, told her how proud he was. This meant the world to her. In her epilogue, The Education Manifesto, Kenny talks about the reasoning behind her starting up the Harlem Village Academies. She also expresses her strong opinions on public schools. American public schools are filled with dedicated teachers whose morale is being destroyed by a low accountability, low empowerment culture that disrespects them, Kenny says. She has a lot of passion for consistently improving her schools and the culture for her teachers and staff. Also, throughout the book, Kenny finds moments to return to the topic of political obstacles, specifically the teachers' union and state regulations. But she makes her most dramatic claim about these obstacles in her manifesto, where she in no uncertain terms blames the union and to some extent the state for impediments to education that are destroying the, quote, social fabric of our country. Kenny entirely attributes her ability to provide what is best for the children and families of the community to the fact that she runs a charter organization and is therefore free from union regulations. Her mission to provide education to those who need it the most would not have been possible without either her charter status or the incredible teachers whom she empowered to make a difference in the lives of so many.
Even